the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we rise. Hope reflected in.
Welcome to the Unwanted Fraternity Podcast. Greg Tonkinson here along with my co-partner and wife, Jen. Listen, we are so excited to be yet with you for another episode. And as always here at Tonks Pub, love the ambiance, love the environment, but most of all, we love the conversation. We also want to let you know about Herzog Foundation, whom we have partnered with now for, a couple months now, I guess,
Yes, I think so.
Herzog Foundation asked us if we'd come on board with them, and we were thrilled to do that. Unwanted Fraternity Podcast, along with our sister podcast, Meliora, the podcast. And that the reason is Herzog Foundation centers around helping parents, youth pastors, Christian educators, anyone that is forward-facing toward Gen Z, Gen Alpha, helping them to become culture changers for Christ. And so their podcasts, there's 13, 14 of them. We are honored to be a part of that. Listen, if you need resources, if you need tools, if you need ways to provide help to the next generation, go to herzogfoundation.com/podcasts. You are going to find all you need right there. Well, Jen, we've been in a series now for a few weeks on counseling. We talked about your story, which was riveting, 4 episodes worth of hearing about Jen's story, and we were thrilled to do that. I learned a lot. It was fascinating. I know, it was a great time.
Married, yes.
And so we came out of that. We talked about our kids for a little bit, and then we just kind of segued into, listen, one of the things we pride ourselves in the Unwanted Fraternity is you're not doing this alone, right? Like, this is not a journey to be isolated in. It's not to be on an island. It's not to pull up your bootstraps and say, I can figure this out. And what God has done in so many good ways is he's provided people with passions and talents and skill sets to go a little bit further than probably most of us by trying to understand, like, why is something happening? And we talked to Bailey last episode about his desire to figure things out. And I think what we all concluded was, man, so many of us get into these conversations because as Christians, we're just called to listen to one another, right? To bear one another's burdens. And then it kind of, in a lot of our conversations, reaches a point where you're listening to someone share their story, share their pain, share their grief, and you're just kind of concluding, like, I've reached the end here in terms of wisdom, in terms of resources, in terms of here's what you should do next. And you can kind of see, like, even in their eyes, like, help me. And there's this white flag that goes up. It's like, I want to help you, but I can't. Like, it's like you just feel bound to, and I'm not sure that we should be in a position where it's like we're starting to throw out information or helps that aren't helping them, right? That are actually deterring them from getting help. And so what God did in his infinite wisdom is he said to some people, hey, go learn about this stuff, right? Go learn about how the human psyche works, about how the human body works, about how the human mind works, and really even connect that with how our soul works. And thus we have counselors, we have therapists, we have people that not only love the Lord, but also are passionate about helping teens and adults and married couples and singles, just trying to better their lives by giving them resources that they desperately need. And so we said to Bailey last time, hey, we're not only going to have people that have gone to counseling on, we're going to have counselors on, and we're going to have therapists on. And today I'm so excited. Why am I so excited?
We are excited because we are honored that Claire Pachuilo will be here sharing her knowledge.
Claire at the pub.
I'm here.
Like, she's not even dialing it in. She's like here.
She's physically here
Yeah,
with us.
that's
yes.
so cool.
Yes, and we are so grateful because she has such expertise to offer to our listeners and to educate us. Even as she was coming in today, I was like, oh, I don't know that information. So she's going to share a lot of wisdom with us today.
Yeah, Claire, we're so excited. Thanks for joining us, honestly. Good to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Such an honor.
So what we want to do, Claire, is in a very short period of time talk about everything. And so I know you're equipped to do that. Why don't we just start with it's a unique role, and when did God kind of capture your heart as to like I really want to go deeper in this?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a family that my parents were in full-time ministry throughout my whole childhood, and so naturally my life was kind of geared towards supporting and loving and being with lots of different kinds of people, even just kind of by proxy from my parents. And so naturally that led to me and my sisters all being in helping professions. My sisters took more the medical route, and I got curious about that and found out it wasn't for me. And so I kind of defaulted in school, in college, to psychology because it just felt like it made sense. It's like, if I don't know what I want to study, I would love to study humans and learn more about me and others and these relationships. And even if I don't use it, it seems valuable. And then,
So do you, Claire, do you think that for a lot of your contemporaries and peers, is that kind of true? Like there's an altruistic kind of virtuous reason for doing it, but also there's some self-serving, like, hey, I win because I'm helping people, but also like I'm getting help. Like I'm discovering a little bit more about, someone, maybe my past and whatnot.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's kind of a running joke in the field that you become a therapist because you want to figure out your own
Yeah, right.
self.
Yeah.
There's some things undone in yourself. And
Yeah.
so it is definitely both and. I mean,
Yeah.
that is something. When I didn't even know I wanted to be a therapist, I just knew I want to be in a career that's going to consistently stretch me and push into me and help me grow. So I think a lot of therapists are predisposed to that a little
Well,
bit.
and what's cool about that too is like when I went to seminary, all the professors had to be pastoring, right? They all had to have ministry experience. I think that speaks volumes if I'm sitting in front of a counselor and I know, listen, they've gone through some stuff, and that may not be the time to talk about it because I'm the one, needing help. But it would be healthy for like to come into someone's presence and to think, boy, you don't need any help, or you've never dealt with anything, or there's a disconnect there. So I love the fact that a lot of counselors are like, no, I'm, free counseling for me because I'm learning as I go. And, but then you do reach a point where you are able to look at someone and say, man, praise God, like I've got some answers. I've got some helps for you. When did you kind of figure that out in your career, that you kind of turn the corner from this is overwhelming to I'm kind of getting my feet under me?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always areas that surprise me. And so I'm always a little bit on my toes.
Yeah.
But
do you ever tell the patient, that's a new one? Like, is that...
people will say, you've probably heard it all. And I say, I think I have. And then the next day it happens. So there's always surprises. And so I think really, you go through your clinical hours that you have to be under supervision. And I really do feel like the timing of that was really appropriate. Of once I finished those hours, which took about 3 years.
Wow.
I felt a lot more confident of I can kind of hold my ground, and I feel way more settled showing up in the room with people, and a little bit more competent. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to have you explain to us before we jump into like the questions that we had for young people. Well, first of all, tell us what kind of counseling do you do?
Yes.
Adults or children or
Yeah.
both? And then I had a question after that.
Perfect. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And within that, I see adolescents. So for me, that's 12 and up. A lot of the work I do with adolescents is a lot of family work and parent involvement. And then I'll see adult individuals, couples, and adult families too.
What does it take to be, I know.
Jumped in.
Well, you've been with me long enough to know. If we're at the pub,
ready to ask.
if we're at the pub, we're just gonna jump in. What is an EFT and an EMDR?
Oh, yes. So those are two modalities of therapy. So two specific types of therapy that a therapist can get additional training in to work with certain populations or certain presenting problems. So EMDR, Bailey actually talked about it on his episode.
Really?
The thing with the buzzies. That
Oh,
he was
yeah,
holding the
yeah.
buzzies in his hand. EMDR represents eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Jeez.
The worst name for a
Yeah,
type of therapy.
no kidding. Gee
So
whiz.
EMDR for short. And it is the number one researched effective approach for processing trauma. And so trauma is stored in the body, in the nervous system, and not in the brain. And so you can't talk through trauma to resolve it. You have to kind of tap into this full body experience, as he was talking
I
about,
know
like
that.
going to relive those memories.
Yeah.
But in a way that our body and our brain can store them properly, as in not as distressing or disturbing of whatever it was.
Man.
So one of the modalities I use is EMDR
Yeah.
for clients with trauma. And for a lot of other reasons too. It really helps your nervous system find sense of safety, regulation, all that good stuff. EFT stands for emotionally focused therapy, and it is a attachment and trauma focused approach to working with couples or any relationship dynamic. So it pulls in attachment history of understanding our primary caregivers growing up in our household built the foundation of how we view and experience so many things in our life, like safety, connection, emotions, conflict, and how those things show up in our adulthood, even outside of our family of origin. So it uses kind of the attachment perspective as well as more of tracking conflict in a certain way. I tell my couples that they come in thinking we had 10 different fights this week, and we actually find that they had the same fight 10 different times.
Wow.
And so they engage in the same conflict cycle. So
Yeah.
those are those two types of therapy.
Do you think that I jumped in? Look at
See.
my turn.
Took
You're
his
getting it. You're getting it.
Do you think that, so have we maybe discovered more about trauma and that's why we see more trauma therapy happening? Or do you think that we are having kids have more trauma now? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Totally. You know, I think a big reason there's been an uptick in trauma work, even the word trauma, right? It's
Right.
not a word 20 years ago
Right.
that was being used a lot, is the surge of mental health awareness that came with the pandemic. That was like a big wave of normalization of mental health and education, and that led to a lot of destigmatization of it.
Right.
So we've been given so much more language around what's trauma, what are these experiences our body's having, like anxiety or depression. And so I think there's been more awareness of it that leads people to identify with it more. But because of that, I think it's kind of chicken or the egg. A lot of people want to invest in trauma research. And so there's more studies being done. Therefore, there's more approaches that we're coming upon that can support the trauma work. Yeah.
When you because this was when we finished with Bailey last episode, he said, because we said we're having Claire on, and the Claire, I think we said actually, and he said, check, like have her fact check, like I would be interested, and because you're getting it from someone's perspective who has a very limited, narrow perspective, and it's experiential, but it's limited in scope. And so was there anything that Bailey said, like he was talking about frequency, and he was talking about number of sessions, and was there anything that he said that you thought, I just want, as a licensed professional, I just want either to set the table or clear the records or whatever, because we really do want this to be a resource, and I would defer more toward your understanding. He was speaking out of experience, but you're speaking from both experience and also academia. So was there anything you noticed that you thought, hey, just for your listeners' sake, this might be helpful for them?
Yeah. I mean, well, talking about like the process and even some logistics.
Yeah.
One thing that stood out to me is it sounded like he went straight in with an initial session with a therapist.
Yeah.
Which that's everyone does it differently.
Yeah.
I always recommend people to do multiple consult calls with different therapists. So if you have the luxury of getting recommendations from someone in the field of like, hey, I trust these clinicians, look through their bios and then narrow down to maybe 2 or 3 and give each one a shot of, usually they offer a 15-minute free phone consult. And I tell people all the time, please be picky. Like, don't just
Wow.
think you
Yeah.
have to go
Right.
to the first name you get or
Right.
the first one that your friend went to.
Yeah.
And so those consult calls really let you get a feel for someone, ask some real questions, even just see like, what is kind of the relationship like? How does the conversation go?
That's awesome. Yeah. What's
And
the
then-
process? Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you're new, like
Right.
please ask all the questions. There's no naive questions
Right.
in it. And the other thing he mentioned, and this isn't a correction or anything, but you were talking about how do you know when you're done with therapy
Yeah,
or exiting?
right, yeah.
And he's like, I just stopped.
Just stopped
and
going, yeah.
that is majority of clients. That's
Really?
how we end.
Yeah.
I've had very rarely do I have like an official closing session.
Yeah.
A lot of times it'll be like, hey, I think we can go down in frequency. Like, I think you got this. Well, let's test this out.
Yeah.
And then eventually, usually clients kind of drop off. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like,
Right.
as a professional, I am not offended by that. Of course, I think of that client, like, I hope they're doing well.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's never an expectation of the why. Like,
Yeah.
there's no.
Is the proverbial file always kept open, or how does that work with you guys? Like, do you have to
Yeah.
close the file, or
Yeah.
can
So-
they come back a year and
Gosh, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was, you guys,
'Cause he even
talked
said,
about
yeah,
a,
like-
a tune-up session,
Yes.
or like a maintenance session,
Right.
So a lot of clients will put 2 on the books a year as just like a mental note of maybe I should check in. Maybe they cancel it. But I have plenty of clients that maybe I haven't seen for a year, and then we'll be like, hey, I just need to talk through this one thing.
Sure.
Or, hey, this family event happened. That was really important. Most of those sessions are us kind of just reminding of the work we've done, and clients being like, oh, yeah. So it's usually like a tune-up. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is the same thing. And they're like, oh, yeah.
That's really comforting because
Yeah.
I stopped speaking to the first one that I
Yeah.
went to because I was like, I think I'm okay. And then it just time went on and time went on.
Yeah.
And then she finally sent me a like exit letter of like, hey,
Yes.
just wanted to like let you know that I'm going to
Yeah.
formally close your file. But in my mind, I kept thinking, well, I can't go back because she probably has forgotten me.
Oh my
And then,
gosh,
so
no.
that's good to hear, you know, like
Yes.
that you wouldn't have to do all of it over again because it's so hard to relive that first session.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and then think, okay, well, I have to go back and explain everything again. So that's encouraging to know that counselors have, you know, preparation before they meet with you again for a little tune-up. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The door is always open. And, you know, there are some formalities if there's an open chart after X amount of time, we do have to close it, but
Okay.
that doesn't mean it's done. It means,
Yeah.
hey, when you come back, you'll probably do a little paperwork and we'll reopen your
Oh,
chart.
okay.
That's all.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In your wonderfully written bio, you mentioned that you enjoy and, whether you're grappling with life transitions, relationship dynamics, trauma, grief, self-esteem, or struggles with anxiety and depression. I'm dedicated to helping you cultivate a strong sense of self and leveraging it to enrich your life and relationships. Out of those, in I would say the past maybe let's say 24 months or so, what are you seeing an uptick in? Is something trending right now? And maybe Claire, even if we could dial it down into maybe those under 25.
Okay. Yeah. Gosh. And this is such a biased perspective
Sure.
because within my work, people learn the type of therapy I do. So then certain
Right.
types of
Yeah,
people
that's
get
right.
referred to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think with more emerging young adults, it's a lot of navigating how, as I age and as I get my independence, how do I navigate myself in terms of my family, meaning I'm discovering these differences or these changes in myself. And so as I'm becoming my own person, how do I make sense of this? Or as I get older, it feels like parents are maybe showing up in the same way they always have, like I'm a teenager and now I'm not. So how do we navigate boundaries or communication? Or I think that's a big one. But also there's a lot to do with social anxiety. There's a lot to do with navigating new relationships like dating, and there being a lot of fear and hesitation around that.
Yeah.
And under that, I would say, like with teenagers, it's just navigating big emotions is a huge one.
Wow.
And how to not just let those be on the loose.
Yeah.
And show up and splatter against all of our relationships. Yeah.
So if you're just joining us, we're here with Claire Pachuilo. She is joining us on Unwanted Fraternity. Claire is also going to be on our sister podcast, Meliora the podcast. And Claire, I really do want to do more of a deep dive into, because that is about teen sanctification and all the challenges teens are facing today. And so I'll hold off some of those questions for that episode. And if you're interested in that, please join us on that episode. When you deal with adults or children alike, would you say that technology has played a significant, like, do you have job security because of the advancement of technology? Would you marry those two thoughts?
Yes and no. I think in some ways I see technology really supporting mental health in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Again, the normalization of it, giving language that maybe we wouldn't get typically. If your family is not one that has dove into their own mental health, you're probably not learning about it. And so seeing things on the internet can be really educational.
I think about that.
But the overuse, obviously, is where the issue comes in.
Right.
I mean, I've seen teens get connected with people they would never get connected with in a positive way.
Yeah.
Like the social connection. But the overuse is definitely the issue, right? And the exposure. And
Right.
so, it's all the same struggles that I think teens have had for a long time, but the context they're receiving it is so different.
Yeah.
So body image issues, cyberbullying, the isolation that comes with social media use and the lack of socializing. Those are some really impactful areas that I see.
Well, save that because we're going to get after it in Meliora for sure. Claire is, you got to jump in here because I'm going to keep going.
Get in there.
So you are recently married and you couldn't have picked a better guy. Has that framed, because I'm so glad we're here talking to a counselor, because I want people to understand you're a person, you've got a life, you've got, you got to get up in the same way we all do. So you recently got married, so that's another layer to your life. 6 months in, has your marriage given you more of a context when you're now doing counseling with married couples or singles or whatever? Because part of it is, even when I was a pastor, just looking at someone and just the thought of, I don't know you're specific, but I'm in the ballpark, just because I'm, in ministry. It was, hey, I'm in ministry. I get the stresses of ministry, right? If you were to go to a therapist or counselor's conference, like, you're all in the same room, there's a level of, we get each other, right? Definitely. So now when you're doing marriage counseling, has the past 6 months really helped frame a little bit more of an understanding when couples come to you?
Yeah, I have two responses on this. So one is, before I had a ring on my finger, couples would ask me a lot, are you married, right? They want to know.
Right.
People are eager for that. Or do you have kids?
Right.
When I work with kids. And kind of the answer I would give is, I'd ask, what feels important about that for you? And to want to know more of, like, is this a non-negotiable? Is this a trust building? But
that alone, like that, her answer right there was, we could probably turn the cameras off right now. She just flipped the entire, like, wasn't that brilliant?
It is.
Like, because
I'm gonna take
their
that into the
motivation, their motivation was like,
that.
you have nothing to tell me because you're not married, right? That was kind of that's why they're asking. But she flips it and
doing
says,
that one.
and she doesn't even say that. She doesn't even say, like, I know why you're saying that.
Yeah.
She says, why is that important to you? That's brilliant. That is like, I'm writing that down because I'm using that. Believe me, on Monday I'm using that.
Yeah. Another one you can do is, what difference would it make if I was? Yeah. And so you can use that with your students too.
Yep.
What difference would it make if I did have a good weekend? So I'll share with them, I would understand why you want to know, like, that there's life experience and wisdom you're hoping to get.
Right.
And you're coming to me not because of my marriage. You're coming to me because of my education and some expertise.
Right.
And at the same time, I am never going to be the expert of marriage. You are the expert of your own relationship.
Yep.
And just like you go to a doctor, you don't ask them, have you had this disease, or
Yeah.
have you had this
Right,
fever?
right.
Because of their
That's
their
so good.
background
Yeah,
and education.
that's so good. And you know, I'm sure you guys have like strict boundaries. Like we're not here to talk about Claire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I'd be, I don't know, concerned, but if my counselor just started in with, well, last week I was talking to my wife and this is how, you know, and I'm just like, that's
Yeah.
cool, but it's, you know, here I am, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Definitely. And to answer your initial question, yes, I think it's given me a lot of perspective and
Yeah.
realistic knowledge of
Right.
what can I ask these people? What could I expect them to do, or what change can I really expect? But I think that's also come from so many other areas, but definitely my own relationship plays into that. And at the same time, when people do ask personal questions, I am a relational attachment therapist, so I believe in them getting to know some pieces of me.
Okay.
Or like I'm not a blank slate.
Okay.
Right? And so I'll share, but there's an art to sharing, definitely. There's intention of, I'm
Yeah.
not sharing because this is fun for me to talk about.
Yeah.
There's a purpose behind
Yeah.
what I'm giving you.
that's good.
Yeah.
No, that's
Great.
good.
Relatability. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a little. Well, as you know, we've gone through Greg's story. We went through my story. For those people out there listening who are in the middle of it, or maybe in the beginning stages of it, and considering that their kids are struggling with the situation, but yet maybe one of the one of the parties is not willing to go to counseling, what can you say to them about the importance of putting both parents involved? Do you think that's important? Do the kids just need to go? Like, how do parents navigate that?
Yeah, it's good.
So to clarify, is this for navigating any sort of grief? Is this about just going to therapy in general?
For kids.
Yeah, for kids. Just going through that initial part of grief. Because we talked about,
For grief,
just to give you some background, we talked about when Malia was 4, she experienced loss, but and Greg put his 3 kids into like some play therapy counseling, I think, just to kind of help them. I think it was play therapy, but just something to where
I wouldn't even know.
Sorry, he can't remember, but some
They
sort of
colored.
counseling.
I know they
Yeah.
colored.
That's
Colored,
good.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
probably play therapy,
Yeah.
but and then they kind of stopped going.
Yeah.
And that wasn't because they were, against it or anything. It just didn't seem to be needed at the time because they had so much support around them. And then when my kids went through their initial experience, I wanted to get them counseling because there was that person who had chosen to leave the environment and then was very absent in communication and spending time with them. And so they were very confused. Yeah. And I was worried about them having being able to connect with others as they got older. They were very, very connected with me, almost in a way of like dependency. I mean, they were supposed to be dependent, but
anxiously
dependent.
Yeah.
And so how do you help parents with that who like maybe, because my ex-husband did not want them to go to therapy.
Definitely. So how to
like when
really
should they
support.
start?
Yeah. So I think if you, especially, well, with anyone, when you go through a really big sudden life change, like loss, especially, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, every form of loss can be traumatic.
Sure.
And I use the word traumatic as really distressing and disturbing to your life. Like this is a full change in a 180. There's some losses that are way more traumatic than others, but there is a lot of value in getting to actively process that as fresh as it is. And so when I experience friends or families or there's kiddos that went through a really sudden loss, I really recommend seeing a professional as soon as you can, because there's actually this window of time before some of these things cement in our brain as trauma, as something that is going to be kind of permanently there until it's processed through.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a window of time that I really encourage, like, let's get in right away. And maybe there's nothing significant here that's like really overwhelming them, but just to kind of do a pulse check of how are things going, getting another set of eyes on it. And when it comes to kids going, it is so important. As an adolescent therapist, it is a non-negotiable to me that both parents are involved. Now, if it's a custody situation, one parent has full custody, the other parent isn't willing to come, great. Let's at least get one parent in. Like, that's better than nothing.
And when you say go, you mean be in the room, or
What do parents do?
is it,
Yeah.
because like we went with our teenager
Yeah.
and we were outside the room, right? So, and he was 15. or so.
Yeah.
And so, and it was hard because then the therapist comes out and I'm like, what'd you guys talk about?
Yeah,
Because
and what do we
he
need to
was,
do?
because our kid wasn't saying anything.
No. And,
Like, what'd you talk
do
about,
we
Zach?
have-
Nothing.
like,
I was
we
like,
have
not,
homework
yeah,
or
like,
are
you
we
know.
supposed to
What
look
can
at
we
him
focus
differently
on?
now?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and of course for you guys, I mean, this is such a big stress on you,
Right.
bringing your kid to someone you don't know,
right.
and for a really good reason. Like,
Absolutely.
you're at a point of urgency,
Right.
So I can speak for how I work with parents.
Yeah.
And every teen or adolescent therapist is going to be different, but I set it up as the first session. It's almost always kiddo and parents.
Okay.
I usually do 70% of the session with the whole family.
Okay.
And then the last 15 minutes or so with that teen
Oh,
to build
okay.
some
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
Of like, ooh, what's it like with mom and dad not in here
Yeah.
anymore? Kind of some alliance building.
Do you explain to them why you're doing it that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I share, like, from my work, it is so important that I get a full perspective of what this kid's experiencing. So I tell the kiddo, we are going to get time alone, but I need mom and dad's perspective to get a full picture. And
Yeah.
there might be things that you don't see that they see. That's
Yeah.
really helpful for me.
Have you had to play, because I can just see that like in so many ways going sideways. Have you had to play referee? Have you had to, because I can just see like in marriage counseling too, but in with two parents and a kid, you know, there may be teaming up or
Yeah.
there may be like, I didn't say that, or,
Yeah.
you know, you're hearing it, or,
Yeah.
so I can imagine it's not only trying to give great wisdom and resources, but also trying to manage in the moment to make it as positive and safe and productive as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little both and, because when I have those moments in the room with families, it's really helpful for me to see, because I'm like, oh, this is probably what happens at home.
That's great.
And
Yeah,
I get
that's
to
true.
use that active and
Yeah.
alive in the room.
Right.
It's not us talking about when conflict happens.
It's-
It's happening.
it's happening.
So let's
Thank
dive
you for
in.
inviting me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I joke with couples, like, I'm not going to make you fight in front of me. I'm not going to stir something up, but it'll happen.
But it's gonna.
So those moments are really helpful, and sometimes I will let things play out a little bit because I want to
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I am there to be a container for it,
Yeah.
and for both parties to really know they can count on me
Yeah.
to help bring things down.
It's got to be so telling for you, Claire, because I'm sure, like, I probably represent some men out there where it's like, I'm going to beat her. Like, I'm going to,
Win.
like,
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
win this, and give a family a half hour, 50 minutes, whatever. And all of a sudden I'm acting like I would at home. I don't even know I'm doing it in front of you. And I'm just showing you my cards, and I didn't even mean to, but because these are the people I'm struggling with or working with or living with or, you know, raising kids. And so naturally our emotions are going to come out the way they would at home. Like, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. It's the relationship is alive in the room, right? So
Right.
it's going to happen.
We're running a little short on time, and again, like I said, we could do this forever. Two questions. You can take either of them, none of them. What is, because I know our listeners out there, the majority of them attend church. They have a faith. I know you have a faith, and so what is the difference between biblical counseling and I'm a Christian counselor or therapist? And then secondly, what do you think about I don't want to call it preventative, but I'll use that word, counseling, where somebody shows up and says, honest to goodness, I'm not like lying here. I don't think there's anything wrong. Like, I feel great. I have a healthy family, but my friend said everyone should get counseling. Like, so I'm here. Would you say to that person, come back when something is, you know, something sideways in your life? Or is would it be good for someone just to show up, just to talk to someone who is a professional?
Yeah. I'm going to try to speed answer both of them. So first, with the biblical counseling. Biblical counseling is usually someone who is there to help guide you from a scriptural perspective. So they are usually have gone through some sense of training or certification, but they're not a licensed therapist who has studied psychology. So that's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
But biblical counselors are out there, and it's more similar to like pastoral care,
Yeah.
or when they work at churches usually, or
Yeah.
maybe for nonprofits. They tend to have a lower rate if they are charging, so that can be a really helpful resource for someone who maybe can't pay
Sure.
out of pocket. Where then there's licensed therapists who are Christians and maybe outwardly advertise or market for Christian clients. And even if they don't, there is a lot of therapists out there that really value the mind, body, spirit perspective of spirituality, no matter the person, plays a huge role
Sure.
into how we experience ourselves and the world. And so with a lot of my Christian clients, one, I make sure, hey, is this important to you? Like, where do you land on this? What level of involvement do you want this to be in our work? And then I pull that in a lot for points of support and resources for them, meaning, if someone's getting really dysregulated in session, I might do a guided imagery that involves the Lord or Jesus, or we might talk about points of scripture that feel really grounding to them.
Yeah.
So it's maybe not as like direct as, hey, let's look at what scripture says in
Right.
terms of your problem,
Right.
but they're still using like a lens and an integration that
Yeah.
involves faith.
It would be, I think, like we work at Valley Christian Schools, and so all the staff are believers. Maybe your emphasis is science. You're a science teacher. So the content is going to be, we talk about science and biology or whatever, but that person is coming at it from a biblical worldview. And so if the student says, something along the lines of, well, why did God create, this, or even, hey, can you pray with me afterwards? So as a Christian counselor or therapist, if you're sitting in front of someone who also is a Christian, then those things would become available to that person.
Definitely.
But you also then can give resources and whatnot to people who aren't men and women of faith, and they're still valuable and instructive and purposeful resources.
Certainly, yeah, and looking what aligns with their values.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
It's awesome.
Definitely.
And then preventative?
Yes. So to preface this answer, the number one reason people stop going to therapy is because they felt like they showed up and talked and nothing happened. Like,
That's
there was
exactly what Bailey said.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was no direction.
Yeah.
There was no here's where we're going and why.
Yeah.
And so for someone who would come in like that, I would not tell them, I think I think you should wait necessarily, but I want to make sure that we can make some goals that they're bought into so that I can set up that route of here's where we're going and why.
Yeah.
If you just want to show up and talk, there's a lot of other cheaper ways you can do
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And so one, I want to be sure they're bought into the process. Hey, I've got skin in the game of what I want to work on. And two, that I know where to guide them, that we're not just kind of floating through each session with the soup of the day. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to close, or you want me to close?
I don't want to close. That's the thing. We'll just keep talking.
don't
But
either.
yeah, right.
All night.
But for our listeners' sake, Claire, it was so good to have you on. You're precious. You're educated, but you care. You're passionate. But there were several times, even in this conversation, where they just way over my head.
Yeah.
And so,
Such good
thank you
stuff.
for letting God use you in these ways. I know. And when we send out this, we'll put Claire's bio on there. Reach out to her. Listen, honestly, Claire she's probably booked, but try to get in anyway, because you're going to appreciate it. And praise God, there are people out there that want to work with you in your pain. They want to work with you in your trauma. Do not do this alone. Even if you have great family and friends, we can only do so much for you. We'll pray with you. We'll listen for sure. Quote scripture, and those things are all super beneficial. And then you reach a point where it's like, man, there's some other stuff going on. I think of Bailey. His therapist was peeling back some layers and brought him all the way back to the genesis of really what was going on. And now he's better for that. Why not use people like Claire and others to help you with that? Tune in next time on Unwanted Fraternity. We will see you there. Remember, you're not alone.
Turn on the mic, the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we